My daughter-in-law's late-night whisper sliced through the dark. It's all arranged, she'll sign in the morning, and if not, we have alternatives. I felt the chill of betrayal settle deep, but years of quiet strength kept me steady. Before sunrise, I gathered proof, locked my bank accounts, and planned a silent escape that would rewrite everything they thought they controlled. And that was only the beginning of a storm they never saw coming. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The winter rain had already started its quiet percussion on the roof when I stepped into the dining room. A low glow from the pendant light made the polished table shine, but something felt off before I could even hang my cardigan. My chair, always the one closest to the window, sat slightly askew, and no plate waited for me. Damien kept his eyes on his phone thumb, gliding without pause. Selene looked up with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I stood there longer than was reasonable, the scent of roasted chicken mixing with the faint metallic chill from outside. Did we change the seating? I asked, trying to make it sound casual. Oh, Selene said lightly, sliding a bowl of salad closer to her. We thought it might be easier if you sat near the heater, but I guess we forgot the plate. Damien, could you grab one? He nodded without looking up, a tight smile flickering before he disappeared into the kitchen. The first sting landed not sharp enough to draw blood, but enough to raise a welt. I settled into the chair by the heater, its warmth no comfort at all. Selene steered the conversation toward Damien's latest work project and a friend's vacation in Maui. Every time I offered a thought, she redirected, asking Damien a question or checking a notification on her smartwatch. Damien contributed only short replies, his eyes on the table runner, never on me. Their chatter was like a door closing softly over and over. I focused on the rhythm of my fork against the plate. The silence around me thickened heavy as the damp night outside. Selene finally turned to me with a look of bright interest that felt rehearsed. "Lorraine," she said, voice sugar sweet. "I visited this gorgeous senior community last week. Huron View. They have gardens art classes so peaceful. I thought of you immediately. You'd really be able to rest there." Damien's head dipped slightly, his eyes sliding away, as if the candlelight had suddenly become too strong. My heart clenched, but my face stayed smooth. "That's thoughtful," I said, each word carefully placed. "I'll think about it." The conversation moved on, but something inside me had shifted. I could almost hear my late husband's voice, the one that used to promise, "You'll never be parked anywhere like a forgotten car." The memory was a steadying hand on my back. After dinner, I gathered plates while they retreated to the living room. The kitchen smelled of lemon soap as I washed dishes alone. That's when I saw it, a glossy brochure propped neatly on the counter. Huron View Senior Living. The smiling faces on the cover looked like a recruitment poster for exile. I dried my hands slowly, every motion deliberate. My hurt cooled into something sharper, more focused. They thought they were subtle. They thought wrong. In my room, I powered on the small lamp and set my phone screen up on the nightstand. Banking alerts glowed in unread dots. Tomorrow at dawn, I would check every number, every transfer, every signature. Silence would be my shield, but not my surrender. I stretched out on the bed, the rain still tapping its patient rhythm against the window. My mind settled into a quiet, deliberate resolve. I'll sleep with the lamp on and the banking app ready. At sunrise, numbers will tell me the truth they won't. The room was still dark when I opened my eyes, the faint patter of rain blending with the slow drip of the kitchen faucet. I slid from bed, careful not to wake the creaky floorboards, and started the coffee maker. The smell of brewing beans filled the air, warm and sharp. My phone screen glowed like a tiny lighthouse on the counter. Today the numbers would speak. I cradled the mug in both hands and opened my banking app. The balance spun, refreshing. My pulse tapped to the same rhythm as the rain. Then the list of transactions appeared and my stomach clenched. 3 large withdrawals, all from the past month, each approved with an e-signature I had never created. The amounts were exact enough to be deliberate, like someone measuring theft with a ruler. I enlarged the digital document and stared. The scrawl pretending to be mine carried a familiar slant. Damien's handwriting, subtly careless, a flourish at the end of the D. My breath caught, then steadied. I took screenshots, every tap a quiet strike of resolve. The printer hummed as I fed page after page into a manila folder. Each sheet felt heavier than paper, weighted with betrayal. Curiosity turned to urgency. If there were withdrawals, there might be more. I dug into the account menu, searching for linked profiles. A new name surfaced, a joint account I had never authorized, Damien, listed as co-signer. For a long moment, I only listened to the rain, the sound now like a slow drum of warning. Heat surged through me, but I kept my grip tight on the phone. "You will not take what I built." I whispered, voice barely audible above the coffee's hiss. Shock sharpened into a cold, precise fury. I saved every document twice. When the folder was thick with proof, I slid it into my tote. I rehearsed what I would and would not say. No accusations yet. Neutral words, steady breathing. This was no time for an emotional outburst. It was a time for strategy. By the time I reached the kitchen, Celine was slicing oranges, her perfume mixing with the scent of toast. Damien leaned on the counter, scrolling through headlines. "Morning, Mom," he said, eyes quick but unreadable. I smiled and returned the greeting, the folder hidden against my side. We chatted about the weather, about a new restaurant downtown. Every word felt like an exercise in balance, outwardly polite, inwardly vigilant. As I sipped my coffee, Celine dropped her next line with casual sweetness. "You know," she said, "simplifying finances makes family life so much easier. We've been looking into ways to streamline everything. Just makes sense, doesn't it?" I set my cup down gently, a quiet smile masking the storm inside. "Efficiency can be important," I replied. My voice was smooth, but a plan was already forming behind it. I left the table, smiling, the folder against my ribs like a secret heartbeat, proof that my life was mine, not theirs. The elevator chimed softly as I stepped into the marble lobby of the high-rise downtown. Glass walls framed a skyline glinting with late winter sunlight, the Willamette River a silver ribbon beyond. My pulse quickened, but I kept my shoulders squared. I'd spent years tending other people's needs. Today, I was here for my own. Benjamin's office smelled faintly of cedar and strong coffee. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a measured glance that seemed to weigh my resolve. I set the manila folder on his mahogany desk, the paper inside thicker than any storm cloud. "Everything I could gather since last night," I said. My voice didn't tremble. He flipped through screenshots and printed statements, each page drawing a deeper furrow between his brows. "You did the right thing, Lorraine," he murmured. "These withdrawals aren't minor oversights." Relief flickered through me, someone finally listening, but unease followed fast. If the evidence startled him, what came next? Benjamin leaned back, fingers steepled. "I need you to be prepared," he said. "If Damien and Celine suspect you're onto them, they could petition the court to declare you mentally unfit. It's a tactic we see more often than we'd like." The room tilted for an instant, a flash of cold alarm. I steadied myself on the arm of the chair. "I'm not losing my mind," I replied, each word deliberate. "And I won't let them steal what's mine." He nodded, eyes sharpening. "Good, because you have more leverage than they realize." He slid another folder across the desk. "Your late husband placed the house in a trust years ago. Sole beneficiary you. They can't touch it without your consent." The word struck like a sudden beam of light through storm clouds. Surprise surged first, then a deep, steady empowerment. The home my husband and I built together was beyond their reach. We mapped the next moves carefully. Benjamin outlined immediate steps, secure all accounts with new passwords, notify the bank's fraud division draft legal notices, and arrange quiet monitoring of Damien and Celine's financial activity. I took notes, my pen moving with calm precision. each item on the list felt like a reclaimed piece of my life. When the meeting ended, I stepped outside into a dusk of lavender and gold. The Willamette shimmered beneath the fading Sky City lights, flickering to life like silent allies. I walked the river path, Benjamin's words echoing with each measured step. Betrayal would not define me, strategy would. The trust documents in my bag were more than legal proof. They were a promise kept and a future secured. I felt the city lights flicker like silent allies as I gripped the trust documents, proof that the house and my dignity were mine to defend. Celine's knock came just after 9, a sing-song tap-tap and a bright sugar-soft, "Good morning, Lorraine, are you up?" I opened the door to her smile, precise as a ribbon. She balanced a tray with tea and a small plate of berries, the kind gesture wrapped around a hard center. "I thought we could do a quick tour this week," she said, setting the tray on my dresser. "There's a lovely senior community Heron View just to see options. No pressure." From the hallway, Damien hovered with his phone, scrolling thumbs, moving eyes, not meeting mine. "It might be helpful," he said to the wallpaper. I thanked them and watched the performance end on the beat of my closed door. When I later passed the family calendar, a faint pencil note had sprouted beside Thursday Heron View, 10-0. The same name from the brochure I found after washing last night's dishes. A smile without warmth formed on my face, a thin shield. I'd learned to hold it in place. In the kitchen, the morning mail sat in a neat fan on the island cable bill, a glossy catalog, 2 envelopes with my name redirected by a ballpoint arrow to a basket on the mudroom shelf. That basket didn't used to exist. Beside the mail lay a care plan intake worksheet partially filled in with my birthday, a list of medications I do not take, and a box checked mobility needs assistance. I felt the small, sharp dignity ache of seeing myself described by someone else's pen. No scene, no flair, just breath. While the kettle hissed, I lifted my phone and quietly photographed each page edge to edge the way Benjamin would want it. The camera shutter barely clicked. The images slid into the cloud. I slid the worksheet back where it had been angled just as before and poured water over the tea bag as if nothing in my life had shifted a millimeter. After dinner, Celine offered a cheerful courtesy check-in, leaning against the counter like a talk show host. "How about a little drive tomorrow?" she chimed. "We could stop for muffins on the way. It's good to know what's out there." Damien, stacking plates, muttered. It would simplify the household load. He meant their load, but airbrushed it to sound like mine. I kept my voice smooth. "Let me think overnight." The words were smoke around a steel rod. I dried my hands on a dish towel, then went upstairs. In my room, I plugged the phone into its charger, slipped the trust papers and bank screenshots into a slim folder and set my flats beneath the chair with my coat folded over the arm. If kindness was a costume, I was done assuming it fit. At 2 a.m, the house had that thick silence. Only old timber can hold a faint hum from the refrigerator, the whisper of branches in light rain, then low voices in the kitchen. I sat up heart steady and padded to the crack of my door. Celine's voice floated down the hall on speakerphone clarity. "It's all arranged. She'll sign at the desk. If not, we have alternatives." I could hear the smile in her tone. "Intake can do a same-day evaluation," another voice said through the phone, female brisk. "If there are concerns, we recommend temporary placement." Damien's reply was a strand of thread. "We can't keep this up," he said soft, the way a man confesses to the dark. I hit the record button on my phone, kept the mic angled to the floor, captured the timestamp on the lock screen, captured my own breath slowing to the rhythm of survival. "Tomorrow at 10, Celine concluded. "We'll call when we're on our way." A cupboard closed, a sink dripped exactly twice. Their steps moved away. In the quiet that followed my shock was a clean, bright blade. It cut through fear and left only decisions. I moved by feel. Wallet, passport, driver's license, the trust documents, bank screenshots, and the notes I took at Benjamin's. Prescription meds zipped into a side pocket. A single photograph from a silver frame our wedding day in the church courtyard, my hair. A younger shade, his tie crooked because he hated perfection. I slid the photo into the folder, then opened my phone. The audio clip uploaded to 2 separate accounts. I texted the link to myself, and my attorney deleted the local file, cleared the trash. The photos of the care plan and mail rerouting followed the same path out of their reach, replicated in places they could not touch. I wrapped my navy scarf around my neck, tugged a hat over my hair, and stepped into the flats. In the mirror, a woman looked back who had slept beside grief and learned to wake up anyway. The back door always stuck on cold nights. I eased the deadbolt with the gentlest pressure my fingers could give, pressed the latch, and felt the old wood release. Night air met my face like a baptism. I slipped onto the patio and followed the garden stones past rosemary gone leggy and the bird bath glazed with February's thin ice. The gate latch sang a tired squeak. I steadied it with my palm and coaxed it quiet. The street beyond was washed in a soft drizzle and the low hum of distant traffic on I-84. At the corner beneath the maple that still held a handful of last year's leaves, I ordered a car on my phone. A minute stretched. A porch light down the block blinked on, then off. I did not look back until I heard the quiet turn of an engine and saw a car nose to the curb. The house stayed dark, a silent ship I was finally stepping off. I opened the rear door and slid in. The folder tight against my ribs, my breath an even metronome. The driver glanced at me in the mirror, then away professional as a confessional. As we pulled from the curb, I watched the side gate become a shape, then a shadow, then simply part of the night's texture. I set my phone on my lap and felt my pulse slow to something like possibility. The car pulled away from the curb, and for the first time in years, the night felt like it was on my side. The front desk at the Nines smelled faintly of lemon polish when I stepped in, just after dawn. My scarf was wet, my hands cold, but the lobby's soft light and blue art ceiling steadied me. The clerk spoke in a library hush and handed me a key without small talk. In the elevator, I watched my reflection settle between floors, a woman who had finally chosen herself. The suite opened into quiet linen-draped bed velvet sofa, a city still yawning awake beyond the windows. I set my tote down, locked the door twice, and stood with my palm on the chain as if to feel it cool beneath my skin. Coffee from the kettle tasted stronger than it should. I lined up the folder on the desk like a patient waiting for triage and dialed the number Benjamin had texted overnight his elder law colleague, Marcellus Grant. "I'm downtown," I said. "The files are ready." He offered a noon appointment in a small conference room above the lobby. Until then, I showered heat into my bones, changed into a clean blouse, and wrote myself a short list in a firm hand freeze accounts. Secure the house trust, copy evidence twice, breathe. It felt almost ceremonial making a plan that didn't require anyone else's permission. Marcellus arrived on the dot, tall and deliberate, with a briefcase that clicked open like a seal breaking. "Benjamin filled me in," he said, taking the chair across from me. I slid the folder across the dark wood. He studied the banking screenshots, first eyebrows rising at the carousel of withdrawals. "These are patterned," he murmured, tapping the dates. His finger paused over the digital scrawl. "And this e-signature isn't consistent with your hand." He flipped to the joint account forms and exhaled once. "Not theatrical, just final." "You didn't authorize this." I shook my head. "Then we treat it for what it is." I asked about immediate steps. He mapped them cleanly. "Today we file notices with your banks. We instruct the trustee of record to reaffirm your possession of the property. If necessary, we prepare petitions for temporary protective orders against coercion-forced placement, harassment. Everything precise, everything legal. The scaffolding of boundaries reassembled inside me." "Do it," I said. He nodded once. "And Lorraine, document your competence. Doctor's notes close the door they're trying to pry open." I felt the steadiness of that advice, no anger, just architecture, and I held on to it. While he drafted filings, I opened my laptop and signed on to the hotel Wi-Fi. Rain threaded the windows. Down on the sidewalk, a barista flipped the open sign. I swept their digital trail the way a mother straightens a room, methodical, unsentimental. Selena liked a late-night post about big transitions for family 3 red hearts lined up like a traffic signal. Damien reshared a podcast on caregiver burnout, a tidy alibi for neighbors and coworkers. A cousin in Bend commented, "Proud of you two for doing the hard thing, which told me more than any family meeting. I captured screenshots, file named them with dates, and dropped each into a folder labeled Facts." Searching Selena's maiden name plus blog led back to her lifestyle page, marble counters, white bowls, a life that photographs well. A pale link at the bottom, caregiving notes, opened a separate site tucked behind it. The header in soft script read, "Living with Elle Our Journey," my initial repurposed into content. The first entry claimed I'd tried to cook at 3 a.m. and lashed out when redirected. Another described a confused wandering episode on a day my calendar shows a dental visit and grocery receipt. Each post was framed as kindness, we. We keep her safe. We make the hard choices. I read until my pulse settled, then I captured every page screenshots, PDF prints, the sitemap, the timestamps. I whispered the date of my last bridge game, the phone numbers I know by heart, the dosage on my blood pressure medication, as if reciting my life back to the room. I didn't cry. I dated the folder and added it to the evidence. By mid-afternoon, I sat with Marcellus again, this time with a thumb drive and an indexed printout. He read in silence until his jaw settled. "We'll append this to the evidence packet," he said. "Preservation letters go to the host and payment processors today. If there's monetization, we track it." He laid out the counter-narrative. He preferred a brief factual statement, asserting my competence and the existence of the trust. Nothing dramatic, nothing that feeds their story. "We'll let the documents do the talking," he said, "and we'll move faster than rumor." Back upstairs, I let the quiet hold me. I ordered a small lunch, ate half, and phoned my primary care physician to schedule a cognitive screening. Friday at 10, the nurse offered, "Bring your medications list." I thanked her and added it to my paper checklist. I forwarded bank alerts to the secure evidence address Marcellus created, then photographed the trust documents again under the room's brighter lamp. A text lit the screen from an unfamiliar number. "Everything okay? Damien says you're taking a little break." I set the phone face down. A break is something granted. This was a boundary I gave myself. Sunset arrived early under the rain, turning the city to a tray of coins. I drafted the public statement Marcellus recommended, 4 sentences, plain and verifiable. I attached the blog archive, the index, and the newest screenshots to an email to his firm's subject line, "Avery Evidence Packet 2. Then I wrote one more line at the bottom of my list, "Tell the truth once with documents. Then go live your life." I looked around the quiet room that smelled of clean sheets and lemon polish and understood something simple I was not hiding. I was choosing where to stand. The city lights winked like silent witnesses as I pressed send on the email that would change everything. By 7, I was back in the conference room above the lobby, coat neatly folded folder squared to the table's edge. Marcellus reviewed the final drafts with a red pen that barely touched the page. We were beyond edits into action. He dialed the clerk's office on speaker, scheduled an emergency filing, then handed me a fountain pen I hadn't used since my teaching days. I signed affidavits attesting to my competence, to the unauthorized withdrawals, to the pressure to tour options. We walked 2 blocks through a light mist to the courthouse. The marble smelled faintly of dust and lemon, as if even the building wanted to appear respectable. At the window, a clerk stamped the injunction papers, 3 crisp thuds that sounded to me like locks turning in the right direction. Copies went into a labeled envelope. "Effective upon service," Marcellus said. "Today, preferably before lunch." I nodded. Calm wasn't an act anymore. It fit. Back at his office, we split the calls. I reached the branch line and asked for Bryn Hollis, the bank employee who had once helped me dispute a skimmer charge at the grocery store. "Mrs. Avery, of course," she said, voice low. I explained the freezes and the court filings. "I'll put a manual watch on all linked accounts," she promised. "Any movement triggers a call to me, then to you. No exceptions." I thanked her, added her number to my paper list, and felt a small puzzle piece click into place. Next, I phoned Ruth, an old choir friend who never repeats gossip. If you don't hear from me for a day, assume I'm busy, not lost, I told her. She laughed gently. You were never the lost kind. Marcellus's paralegal texted the process server's ETA. The machine of protection was slow by design, but today it felt like it could run. Near noon, an email pinged my screen with a subject line in Cellini's breezy tone, "Join us tonight, investor, mixer, and vision briefing." Their names sat beneath a logo for a senior living consultancy, and the venue was a Pearl District gallery with Edison bulbs and white brick, the kind of place that sells certainty by the glass. I stared at the time doors at 7 and knew it wasn't a coincidence. People who build narratives prefer an audience. I forwarded the invitation to Marcellus with one sentence: "If I attend, can I do so quietly and truthfully?" His reply came fast. "Yes. We'll arrange entry and witnesses. Keep it factual. No speeches unless invited." I spent the next hour choosing my armor. Not sequins, not flash authority. A navy sheath, my late husband's small gold watch flat, black shoes that wouldn't slow me. I gathered duplicates of the trust pages, stamped filings, and a one-page summary that read like an index rather than a story. Marcellus texted an introduction to a colleague who knew the gallery manager. Within minutes, I had a guest code at the door and an agreed signal if I needed a microphone, one raised finger during Q&A documents already mirrored to a screen. I ate half a sandwich, saved the other half for after, and wrote one more line at the bottom of my list: "Tell the truth, once then leave." The gallery smelled of polished concrete and white wine when I arrived just after 7:30. Conversations hummed like aquarium filters. Damien, in a suit he saves for weddings, stood beside a foam board titled "The Compassionate Path Nodding," as Celine described, "Dignity Forward Transitions." I recognized phrases from her blog dressed up as business jargon. I stayed at the back beside a high-top table and watched. Investors asked about partnerships' collateral scalability. Celine's smile folded into sympathy as she hinted at the strain of multi-generational households, eyes glancing over the audience like a searchlight that never landed on me. When the Q&A began, an older man in a wool blazer, his name tag said, "Harlan asked how they financed their pilot. We leveraged family assets," Celine said a little too smoothly. My hand rose before I felt it. The host saw the gesture, then saw me, and something in his posture straightened. "We have time for one more," he said. "Ma'am," I stepped forward without hurry. "Lorraine Avery," I said, voice carrying as if the room had been built to hear. The family asset referenced is my home held in a trust that designates me as the sole owner during my lifetime. I held up the single-page summary. This is the relevant section, and this, I turned to the host, has been mirrored as requested. The screen behind Celine flashed to the trust excerpt, the clerk's stamp from this morning crisp as a winter sky. A ripple went through the room, not quite sound more like weather. Celine's smile hardened at the edges. "There's context," she began. "There is," I agreed, "an ongoing attempt to open accounts in my name and to present me as unfit. Both claims are false. Legal notices were filed this morning. Banks have been instructed, and any representation that my property is collateral for this venture is incorrect." I kept my eyes on the back row, on no one in particular. I support good care. I do not support coercion dressed as compassion. Someone near the front clapped. It sounded accidental than necessary. An investor cleared his throat and asked Damien if he could reconcile tonight's statements with the documents on screen. Damien's mouth opened and closed, a fish in the wrong tank. Celine reached for his forearm. We were exploring options. She managed the script collapsing. The host looked to me. "Do you want to add anything, Miss Avery?" I shook my head. "No. The papers say what they say." I turned to the table by the door and placed 5 duplicate packets where the business card sat. "For due diligence," I said softly. "No scene, no lecture. Just the truth angled to catch the light." I left while the room was still deciding how to behave. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the slick street threw back the gallery's light in ribbons. I walked to the corner where Martellus's colleague idled in a sedan and slid into the passenger seat. We didn't speak for a block. I thought about the years I had spent trying to be easy to keep about how silence can be mistaken for consent until it isn't. My phone buzzed in my purse, unknown numbers, perhaps questions, perhaps apologies. I let it buzz. Crossing the bridge, the river below, black and steady, I felt the simple physics of momentum. You move in the direction you choose, not the one chosen for you. Behind me, applause mingled with stunned silence, but I only heard the sound of my own freedom. I woke to the phone trembling across the nightstand like a small animal trying to escape. Notifications stacked on the lock screen, links from the Oregonian, a clip from a business blog, tags from strangers. Someone had recorded my moment at the gallery, and the headline under the video read, "Silent Force Mother. Corrects investor pitch with 1 page." My name first and last was spelled right. That alone felt like a blessing. The clip ran again in a loop, me stating ownership, the trust excerpt filling the wall behind Celine. Comments scrolled faster than I could blink. Some were simple. Good for her, others long like letters that had been waiting for a stamp. My coffee maker sighed to life while rain stitched faint lines on the hotel window. Relief warmed my chest, not because people clapped, but because the truth had finally spoken at the same volume as the lie. A text from Damien punctured the glow. "We need to talk." No apology. No question mark. Just a sentence, shaped like a command. I let it sit there next to the unread voicemails. Selene stayed off my screen, which told me as much as any message would. Unknown numbers multiplied. I toggled the phone to do not disturb and made toast I barely tasted. The room's quiet felt earned. I wasn't going to sell it back for an argument on speakerphone. Not today, I told the empty air, and the sentence steadied me. I opened the folder on the desk, checked the copies, and added a sticky note that said, "Speak once with proof." The day had its own ideas. I could feel it. But for the moment, my feet were under me, and my breath was my own. By mid-morning, Markellus's number lit up. "You're everywhere," he said, almost amused. Another call beeped in from a reporter named Isolde Crane, an investigative host with a live digital show and a Sunday slot on local TV. The two of them had already found each other. He looped her in. She proposed a live stream that afternoon, calm questions my documents, on screen a clear record in my own words. "It's not about slinging mud," she said. "It's about sunlight." I pictured the comments, the traps, the way frustration can make a person sloppy. "Ground rules," I said. Markellus answered before she could. "Stick to documents, stick to first-hand facts, no diagnoses, no name-calling." We set a time 3 o'clock and a tech check for 2:30. Isolde's producer emailed a link to upload exhibits, the trust excerpt, the bank screenshots, the care plan worksheet, the blog pages. I titled each file plainly. No drama in the labels, only dates and page numbers. We tested the mic, the light by the window, the share screen button. My hands didn't shake. At 3, the red live dot blinked in the corner and Isolde smiled from a split-screen professional, but not sharp enough to cut. She framed the story in 2 sentences and tilted the first question to me. "Mrs. Avery, what happened last night, I told it in the same voice I would use to teach a recipe. Simple steps, ingredients show no flour in the air. Exhibit 1, the trust. Exhibit 2, the injunction. Exhibit 3, the bank trail with an e-signature that wasn't mine." The screen filled and cleared like a tide. Comments poured in along the sides, some all caps, some dotted with hearts, but I kept my eyes level. Then the producer messaged Isolde. "We have a caller who says he's Damien Avery and wants to respond." Isolde glanced at me. I nodded once. His voice came through thin and higher than usual. "Mom, this is not how we handle family," he began. The chat exploded into punctuation. "Damien," I said, "we're not handling family, we're handling facts." He mentioned context and temporary access. I clicked the audio file from 2 a.m. and let it play Selene's whisper. The phrase, "it's all arranged," the soft assent that was his. My own breathing was calm in the background, like proof of weather. Silence followed, then the muffled sound of Celine near his phone. Hang up. Isolde, steady as a metronome, asked if he disputed the authenticity. He didn't answer. The line went dead. I left the clip to finish all the way to the timestamp. Consent isn't a desk you push me toward, I said, and then I stopped. The point had already landed. After the feed cut, my screen filled with messages, the way dawn fills a kitchen, quiet then all at once. A retired judge emailed offering to speak on a panel about elder coercion. A church group in Beaverton wanted me to address their caregiver circle. An advocacy nonprofit wrote that they could assign a caseworker if I needed one. Strangers told me about their sisters, their fathers, their own invisible chairs, at their own tables. Marcellus texted a thumbs up and a single sentence. You were precise, and that compliment meant more to me than any applause. Bryn from the bank left a voicemail. All freezes are holding Mrs. Avery. No attempts today. I thanked her out loud even though she couldn't hear me, then wrote her a note card I would drop off later. In all the noise, there were these small acts that felt like handrails. I spent the early evening as if I were closing up a classroom, stacking papers, labeling a new folder, returning the room to calm. Down on the street, traffic moved in gentle ropes of red, the rain finally spent. The hotel window held my reflection, with the city behind me, a double exposure. I almost recognized the woman I had been and the woman I had made room for. The cost was real. Sleep lost a son on the other end of a frayed line, but so was the gain. Truth has its own gravity. It keeps you from floating off into someone else's version of your life. I set an alarm, answered nothing else, and let the room go quiet enough to hear my breath even out. As the skyline dimmed, I felt the quiet certainty that my story now belonged to more than just me. The morning after the live stream, my phone felt like a small radio tower buzzing against the nightstand. Email subjects stacked like porch flyers. Senior Center Keynote Request Caregiver Alliance Panel Library Memoir. Workshop, are you available Sunday? A church in Beaverton offered their fellowship hall. A retirement community in Ohio wrote that their residents watched the stream together and applauded at the end. A veterans group in Maine asked for permission to replay the clip at roll call. Someone had stitched highlights into a short video titled, When a Mother Brings Receipts, and by noon it trended high enough to sprout copycats. I warmed my hands around hotel coffee, surprised to find the heat steady and welcome. Gratitude moved through me like good oxygen. Fame wasn't the point, but the chorus of strangers saying, "We see you," felt like a soft blanket in a room that had been cold for years. I answered what I could and organized the rest into folders. Speaking legal community, no. The no pile was smaller than I expected. Otter offers a reality show. Pitch a podcast that thrived on shouting. I declined with simple sentences and no explanations. The yes pile included a community college lecture on financial boundaries, a caregivers roundtable, moderated by a social worker, and a Saturday morning slot at the library where I'd once taken a watercolor class. The librarian ended her note with, "We have your old card on file, Mrs. Avery. We always did." A small truth, but it landed. I had not vanished, even if I had been treated as if I were easy to misplace. By late morning, I took a slow walk along the Willamette and settled at a small cafe near the Riverwalk, the kind with a chalkboard menu and a patient barista. The water slid by in pewter bands, and the bridges looked like sleeping animals. I sipped coffee and read messages from people who sounded like cousins. I hadn't met yet, a retired nurse describing a brother who moved paper out of reach, a granddaughter wondering how to help her grandmother keep the checkbook and the light. Their words braided with the city's usual noises, buses exhaling bike bells, conversation rolling past like friendly weather. Humility kept me seated. I wasn't anyone's savior. I was just a woman who had learned the hard way that silence has a cost, and that proof, when spoken softly and clearly, can be a bell no one can pretend not to hear. Back at the Nines in the early afternoon, the concierge intercepted me at the elevator. "Mrs. Avery, a courier dropped this off," he said, offering a stiff cream envelope with my name in Damien's careful block letters. My fingers knew his handwriting the way a musician knows a favorite key. Upstairs, I sat at the desk, slit the envelope with the room key card, and unfolded the letter. He wrote that the situation had spiraled, that I'd embarrassed the family, that he was trying to keep peace between me and Celine. In the next paragraph, he added that he didn't sign anything without understanding, then 3 lines later that he had only signed what had to be signed for efficiency. There was a sentence about how people online don't know our private challenges, and a request that I stop the public stuff so we could reset. Near the end, he wrote, "I love you," and it was almost my son's voice, but the apology never stepped into the room. I set the letter flat and kept my hand still. Anger would have been easy. Instead, something older and steadier rose, an ache that belonged to years before this one. The page blurred in places and then cleared. I heard his toddler laughter in the Laurelhurst backyard when the sprinkler made a rainbow the slap of his little feet on wet grass. I saw his grade school face bent over spelling words at the kitchen table, tracing letters as if they were paths to a secret. Halloween capes, soccer cleats in the dryer. The night he called from a payphone after his first fender bender and whispered, "Don't tell Dad yet." We had been a family under one roof with too many calendars and not enough patience, and still there had been sweetness, like sugar in the seams. Remembering didn't excuse him. It just kept me from turning to stone. I took out hotel stationery and began my reply with the date. I wrote that I had received his letter and heard the worry between his lines. I stated plainly that any financial entanglements were in the hands of counsel and that all communication about accounts and property must go through Marcellus's office. I made 3 requests without decoration: cease the blog and correct the record, acknowledge the joint account and withdrawals in writing, schedule a conversation with counsel present if he wished to talk about anything real. I added a 4th sentence that cost me something and gave me something back: I love you, and I will not meet in private until the harm is named and the actions stop. There was no performance in it. It was the boundary I could keep at midnight and at noon. I signed my name the way I had on permission slips and birthday cards for decades, and I felt the same steadiness in my hand. Downstairs, the concierge sealed the envelope for courier service and returned a small nod I recognized from people who have handled delicate things for a long time. I stepped outside into the clean cold and walked toward the river again. The city's late afternoon light turned windows into soft mirrors. A busker played an old standard on a saxophone, working through the notes like a man memorizing a prayer. I crossed at the light and let the walk slow my head down to match my feet. For the first time since all of this began, the space around me felt wide rather than empty. Independence has weight, but it also floats. You carry it, and it carries you. The next morning brought another round of messages, this time from organizations I knew by reputation. An elder justice clinic at the university asked me to guest lecture. A national advocacy group offered media training if I wanted it. A pastor wrote that several families had come forward after the live stream to ask for help disentangling their finances. I mapped the invitations to a calendar and left blank squares for rest. The life I was building needed room for quiet. I wrote down my husband's birthday and the date of our first apartment lease, not because anyone else would care, but because I wanted our thread in the weave. In the afternoon, I returned to the Riverside Cafe and chose the corner table where I could see the water and the door. A woman about my age asked if she could sit. She recognized me from the clip, but instead of asking for a photo, she told me about the day her stepchildren boxed her cookbooks while she was at a doctor's appointment. We traded small, precise stories of paperwork and tone, and the way people can make you disappear twice, first from a room, then from a record. When she left, she put a $5 bill under my mug and said, "For your next coffee and for the women who can't sit this long." I left it where it was for a while, like a small flag. Evening fell in a gray-blue curtain, and I walked the long way back along the water. The bridges lit themselves one by one, lamps clicking alive like friendly eyes. A breeze lifted the edge of my scarf and cooled the back of my neck. Somewhere behind me, life in the old house carried on with its screens and schedules. Somewhere ahead, a lectern, a circle of folding chairs, a microphone that didn't belong to anyone but the person speaking into it. I didn't rehearse lines in my head. I practiced breathing and kept my shoulders where they were supposed to be. The night breeze carried his name, but not the power to wound me anymore. By the time the sun lifted over Portland, my phone had become a small lantern of red dots. Invitations from libraries, churches, and senior centers stacked beneath messages from strangers who called me brave, sane, and seen. I answered none of them first. I laid out manila folders across the hotel desk Bank Trust Recordings Press and slid the invitations into a separate file labeled Later. Thin in-room coffee warmed my hands while I walked myself through the day like a fire drill. First stabilize finances, then secure proof. Then, if energy remained, reply to kindness. I called Marcellus on speaker. We ticked through tasks and timing until the plan felt like a spine I could stand on. When we hung up, I breathed once deeply and headed for the bank. At the branch, the lobby smelled of toner and wet wool. Bryn Hollis met me with the steady smile of someone who has led frightened people across a narrow bridge before. She guided me to a side office where the blinds made ladders of light on the carpet and shut the door with a soft click. On her screen, the war over my life was reduced to tidy tabs and blue hyperlinks. The freezes are finalized, she said. Attempts to move funds overnight were blocked. 2 cards were declined at a boutique on Alberta Street at 9:14 p.m. I did not have to ask whose shopping trip had stalled at the register. I signed confirmatory forms. Alerts were rerouted to Marcellus. We'll keep eyes on everything Bryn said, her tone firm without pity. I thanked her and meant it. Back in the taxi, my phone lit with a message from Isolde, the reporter who'd handled me like a human being on the live stream. Source just sent audio. You need to hear. I waited until I was upstairs in the hotel suite, door-latched curtains open to the pale river. I pressed play. Bar noise came first, ice in glasses, the low bass of a jukebox, a run of laughter, then a woman's voice lilting and too loud, tipping over its own confidence. We crafted the dementia story, she said. I recognized the consonants and the practiced smile under them. If she balks, we fast-track guardianship. It's cleaner for investors. Isolde's text followed timestamps, the name of the bartender who recorded it, Astria Finch, and location metadata. I stood very still and let the truth finish speaking. I forwarded the file to Marcellus with one sentence. This is what they planned when they thought I was alone. He called within 3 minutes. It corroborates your 2 a.m. Kitchen clip and the blog, he said, voice sharpened by purpose. We'll attach it to an affidavit with the screenshots, bank records, and trust documents. Civil, first oppose, guardianship, and file defamation. The financial exploitation goes to the DA's Elder Abuse Unit and the IRS liaison, step by step, paper to steel. I spread the documents across the table, aligning corners, until the chaos looked like order. When I finished, I took pictures of the neat stacks, not for evidence, but for my own memory of this moment, a woman alone in a quiet room building a wall the right way, brick by labeled brick. The phone rang again from a blocked number. Instinct said, ignore. Discipline said answer. Hello? A beat? Then my son's voice, rough at the edges like he hadn't slept. Mom. One word that had once been my favorite sound. The ATM swallowed our cards, he said. Celine's account got flagged. This is getting out of hand. We can talk. I stood by the window where the city thins into river and bridges and watched a streetcar slide past like a metronome. We will talk when restitution is on paper, I said, each syllable steady. You will acknowledge the lies. You will return what you moved. You will stop the guardianship effort. Silence then, a short breath that might once have softened me. This is family, he said. Exactly, I replied, and ended the call before my heart could get nostalgic. Evening came with a polished copper sky. I stacked the day into a clean sequence, freezes, enacted evidence, secured boundaries set. There was no gloating, only the solid click of pieces long kept loose, Messages kept landing. Teachers, nurses, grandmothers, women who saw themselves in the quiet parts of my story. I wrote 2 thank you notes and saved the rest for the weekend. I thought of the empty dinner chair the brochure left on the counter, the soft ascent at 2 a.m., and let the pattern settle where it belonged, not as a tragedy I had to carry, but as a map of what I would no longer tolerate. I ate soup by the window and watched fairy lights drift across the Willamette until the surface steadied inside me. My inbox chimed. The subject line was plain as oatmeal notice of emergency guardianship hearing. Inside language that could have described an oil change calendar date. Courtroom number assigned judge, yet it rang like a bell in my chest. The petition had been filed. Our opposition would be heard. I read the notice twice then, a third time to be certain the hour matched the calendar on my phone. It did. I forwarded it to Marcellus, added it to a folder labeled Hearing, and set 2 alarms for that morning, one reasonable one, stubborn. I laid out my navy jacket and low heels. I checked the recorder battery. I placed the trust documents in my tote and slid the zipper closed. Ordinary motions, yes, but they felt like stitching each pass of the thread tightening what had frayed. Night leaned against the glass. I left the desk lamp on and let the room be small and honest. I pictured the courthouse hallway, scuffed floors, old paper, new fear. I imagined Damien's eyes when a judge asked him direct questions the way Celine would hold her shoulders high and righteous until weight found them. I did not rehearse what I would say. I already knew. The truth had become a daily practice, like stretching a stiff muscle until it remembered how to move. I pressed my palm flat on the hearing folder and felt my pulse steady under the paper. Out on the river, a tugboat horn sounded, once low, deliberate, unhurried. I answered not aloud, but in the place where decisions live, I will show up. I will bring proof. I will not be erased. The court date blinked in my inbox like a heartbeat. I saved the file and set my alarm for the fight they thought I wouldn't show up for. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished stone, a scent halfway between history and resolve. My shoes clicked across marble floors where soft echoes mingled with the low murmur of reporters waiting by the doors. Cameras tilted as I passed, but I kept my eyes on the brass directory ahead, heart steady as the second hand of a clock. The chill of the October morning clung to my coat, but beneath it, heat from my own purpose moved like a current. Today was not for spectacle. Today was for truth. Marcellus waited in a side conference room, sleeves rolled to the elbows of his charcoal suit legal pad neatly aligned. He stood as I entered and offered a firm, grounding nod. "Evidence is airtight," he said, sliding a folder toward me. Inside were the affidavits, bank alerts, barroom audio transcript, and the 2 a.m. kitchen recording every moment I'd lived, rendered into paper and pixels. He reviewed my testimony line by line, his voice a low metronome of reassurance. "Answer plainly. Let the documents speak." I exhaled once sharp and deliberate and felt my spine straighten with each word. The courtroom itself was colder, a cavern of wood and quiet scrutiny. When the bailiff called my name, I rose and crossed the aisle. Palms dry, heartbeat, calm. The oath tasted like metal on my tongue, but my voice held. I began at the beginning, the empty chair at dinner, the brochure, the midnight whispers. I handed over each exhibit screenshots, notarized statements, the recording of Celane's voice, plotting guardianship as if it were a brunch reservation. Questions came briskly from Marcellus, then from the judge, each one answered with the clean simplicity of fact. The room's air seemed to sharpen as truth settled into its own weight. Celane took the stand next, a bright scarf looped too tightly at her neck. Under Marcellus's cross-examination, the confident tilt of her chin faltered. The blog posts appeared on a screen for all to see. The bartender's audio played unmistakable. Financial records scrolled like an uncoiling rope. Damien sat stiff behind her eyes, fixed on a point far beyond the bench. When pressed about the unauthorized withdrawals, Celine's responses thinned to fragments I thought I may have, I can't recall. Each word landed like a hollow echo, the plan unraveling thread by thread. The judge adjusted her glasses and spoke with measured clarity. The petition for guardianship is dismissed in its entirety. She glanced toward Damien and Celine, then back to me. All property and financial accounts remain the sole legal domain of Mrs. Lorraine Avery. Furthermore, this court issues a protective order to prevent future unauthorized actions regarding her estate. The gavel's strike was crisp, a single sound that felt like a door locking behind a long pursuit. Relief rose quiet but powerful, not a cheer, but a tide. Outside on the courthouse steps, microphones angled forward like eager flowers. I paused long enough to offer a single sentence. Truth needs no dramatics. Flashes popped, questions followed, but I descended the stone stairs without looking back. The autumn air met me with a clean bite, a freedom so sharp it almost shimmered. The city hummed in late afternoon light, indifferent and alive. As the courthouse doors closed behind me, the chill felt less like winter and more like freedom. Sunlight spilled across the curtains like a quiet blessing. The first sound of my morning, a gentle hush instead of a door creak or a cautious breath. I lay still, savoring the warmth on my face and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. 2 weeks had passed since the courthouse doors closed behind me, and every dawn since had felt like a quiet victory. I brewed coffee, laced my shoes, and took a slow walk along the Willamette, the river, catching the soft gold of early autumn. My journal waited when I returned pages eager for the scratch of a pen that no longer trembled. By mid-morning, my thoughts turned to the evening ahead. Today I would speak at the Portland Elder Advocacy Forum, a stage I never sought yet somehow had found me. I read over my remarks in the hotel suite, pacing with a calm I hadn't known in years. The paper in my hand held more than words. It carried the weight of every silent decision, every careful step out of the shadows. Modest pride flickered as I imagined a room of strangers listening for strength I once doubted I possessed. The forum filled slowly, a low murmur of greetings and cane taps, blending into a soft symphony of anticipation. When my name was called, I walked to the podium with a steady gait and a smile that belonged wholly to me. Faces turned upward, seniors, caregivers, advocates all waiting. I spoke of quiet courage, of planning finances, like planting a garden of dignity as a birthright, not a favor. I told them how silence, once my armor, had become my voice. The room held its breath with me, then released in warm applause that felt like shared triumph. Outside the venue, dusk stretched the sky into shades of lavender and steel. That's when I saw him. Damien stood near a lamppost, hands jammed into his jacket pockets, eyes shadowed with something heavier than guilt. "Mom," he said, voice low. "Can we talk?" My chest tightened, not with anger, but with the echo of love that never fully disappears. I nodded once. We walked beside the river, the city lights flickering across the water. He spoke first, halting words of fear, of pressure, of wanting to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford. He admitted to listening when he should have protected, to letting ambition outrun conscience. "I'm sorry," he whispered the words, nearly lost to the breeze. I listened, heart, both tender and guarded. "I hear you," I said, "but trust is a bridge rebuilt, plank by plank. Your next steps will speak louder than tonight." He nodded, eyes shining with something close to understanding. Later, back in my suite, I opened my journal again. The pen moved easily. Forgiveness is a path, not a single moment. Peace, however, is already mine. I set the book aside and gazed out at the city glowing against the night, a quiet promise settling over me like a soft blanket. The night settled around me like a soft blanket, and for the first time in years, tomorrow felt entirely mine. The brass key turned with a soft click, and I stepped into a condo bathed in late morning light. The Pearl District hummed beyond the windows, streetcars gliding a distant saxophone weaving through the city's rhythm. Sunlight brushed the oak floors warm and certain beneath my feet. The first box I opened held two things: our framed wedding photo and the trust copy that had carried me through every storm. I set them side by side on the entry table, a quiet altar to love and perseverance. And for the first time in years, I felt the space itself welcome me home. By midday, I sat across a polished table from Marcellus, my attorney, while Damien and Selene appeared on a video screen with their counsel. Papers slid between hands in crisp succession. The settlement spelled out everything: a restitution schedule to repay every unauthorized withdrawal, a written public apology retracting the cruel dementia story, and 200 hours of community service in elder care. Legal boundaries were drawn: no contact except through attorneys. I signed with a steady hand, not with anger, but with a calm that felt like justice breathing. Their faces were tight with consequence, but I held only resolve. That afternoon, the hum of a small co-working room turned celebratory. A modest ribbon cutting marked the launch of the Quiet Line Foundation, micro-grants and legal clinics for seniors who needed the kind of help I once sought in silence. Bryn, my steadfast bank ally, pledged seed funding. Marcellus contributed part of his fee. Then came the moment I'd imagined. I signed the deed placing this condo solely in my name. Applause was soft but sure, a chorus of affirmation that ownership of my life was not merely legal, but lived. Later at the bank vault, a velvet envelope waited. My breath caught as I recognized my late husband's handwriting. Inside, his note read, "For the day you need reminding you were never a burden." He had left a small bond endowment for your next beginning and a single line that felt like his voice beside me. Say yes to the life that says yes to you. I pressed the paper to my heart. Not broken, but anchored in a love that had outlasted the noise. Evening brought laughter to my new dining table. I set 4 plates, one for Isolde, Bryn, and Marcellus, and one empty seat with a small potted fern I named Dignity. We shared supper without the need to prove anything to anyone, the air filled with the gentle music of chosen family. No questions about the past, only the comfort of the present. As the night settled, a soft chime from my phone revealed a message from Damien. He attached proof of completed service hours and the first restitution transfer. No pleas, no excuses, just facts. I replied with 3 lines, acknowledgement boundaries, and a conditional path forward if he kept his word. On the balcony, the city lights stretched like a constellation of possibilities. The breeze whispered through the railing as I breathed deeply, my life answering back with a simple, resonant yes. Looking back on every quiet step of this journey, I realize freedom isn't about walking away in anger. It's about standing tall in your own truth. I learned that planning ahead, trusting my instincts, and staying calm under pressure gave me the power to protect my dignity and my future. Maybe you've faced a moment when silence felt safer than speaking out. What did you do? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment with 1 if this story touched you, or share the city you're watching from so we can connect across miles. And if you'd like more true, heart-deep stories like this, please subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. Your voice matters here, and together we can keep inspiring strength, hope, and compassion.